Okay, so hello everybody and welcome to Through the Magical Doors, another conscious conversation with myself, Samaya, and I'm so excited to welcome my guest for today. Her name is Archambault. She's the author and social innovator. She's a founder of CoCreative, a wellness business committed to powerful creative lives and healing a relationship to sex, both collectively and individually. So Julie has written this incredible book that we will be talking about today and really unpacking some of the themes on this incredible sort of theme of sex that we are also obviously such a big part of our lives. And her book is called Sex Up Your Life, The Mind-Blowing Path to True Intimacy, Healing and Hope. Yay! There it is. So welcome, Julie. So wonderful to have you in this space. I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Really lovely to have you. And Julie and I, we were talking about how we met a few years ago on the online space in a Facebook group. And it wasn't until the last few weeks we started kind of like connecting a little bit more. And I became really curious about her work, and we kind of just felt like there was just more of a natural affinity, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm just really interested it's a big topic, Julie, the topic of sex. So I want to know a little bit about what led you to write such a book, and a little bit about your background.
There was a few things. I mean, growing up, there was definitely a few things that I had encountered in my life that didn't feel completely good. And as a teenager, I felt very guarded and protective and felt always like this kind of big sense of almost like these walls that I had to put up to protect myself. And then when I finally found someone I was completely in love with, I would feel a lot of like, even if I was supposed to feel great with sex, I felt a lot of numbness, and I never knew if it was like a good experience or a bad experience.
Yeah.
So I felt there was a lot of question marks around that. And I think it was like later on when I was probably in my, maybe mid-30s, when I was really looking into just all the patterns of relationship in my life and just starting to untangle all these questions around sexuality and feeling there was all these knots. And I started doing this work on myself. And as I unpacked these knots, I was like, wow, like there's so much going on. And I think the other piece too was I was a teacher in a school where it's a very holistic approach, and we're really looking at the full potential of the human beings that we have in front of us. And I remember when I would start with them in grade 1 and go up with them to grade 8. And I remember when we got to like grade 7, I think it was, where we started doing a bit of sex ed. And I just felt like I really tried to do the best I could to bring the reverence and the beauty around sexuality. And yet when they were in grade 8, there's some things that happened where I felt they had not respected each other, and it completely triggered me. We're on a class trip actually in England.
Yeah. Oh, really?
In one of your hostels, I think we were in Bath.
Oh, wow.
And something happened, and it triggered the mama bear in me, and I was just like, what happened? And so I got the guys, I got the girls separately, and I had this big conversation. I was very self-righteous, I was very angry, and I just, like, upon reflection realized that, wow, like that was pretty intense, and I kind of dumped it on them. And also noticed that like it wasn't very helpful for the boys in a way, because I was like just kind of angry, and probably they felt a lot of shame around what had happened. And then the girls kind of looked at me like I felt I was handing over all the fear that you can have around sexuality if you've not been respected or this or that. And I realized like, wow, like if I really want to teach them about sexuality and want to give them a sense of what the potential of sexuality is, I can't come from this place of fear. And that obviously comes from all the unprocessed stuff that I'm carrying. So it just became clear, like if we want to educate in ways that are helpful to both men and women and to all genders, is we have to do our own personal work. So that kind of spurred these questions. It was coming from my personal life, it was coming from my professional life, it was coming from just a constant thread in my life around just the dynamics of like almost like the respect of the feminine as well, because I mean, of all these stories, like one story that just really sticks out to me is when I was like a young teenager, and we were all at our one of our neighbors' house, and all the boys were gathered around the stack of Playboy magazines, and they would open it up and just like point and laugh and snicker, and I was like, that's not fair. Like, we don't have magazines to go and like make fun of their body, and I just felt
Right.
this kind of anger that they were making fun of our bodies. And as a young woman that's just in development and just becoming
Of
myself and feeling
course.
good about my femininity and my body and my sexuality, having these guys like just point and make fun and like use it like in a very kind of condescending way,
Yeah.
I just felt there's these threads in my life where I was always like, well, like there's something that needs to be spoken here to educate, but a context where we can have the proper reverence and guide these people that are completely at loss of like, what is this sexual energy? How do we engage in it in a way that's respectful? How do we not
Yeah.
go and take from someone without respecting their boundaries? Or how do you feel empowered to have boundaries, you know?
Mm.
And so there's a bunch of things going on, but I also wanted to have a much bigger picture,
Yeah.
from just those difficult situations. And like, I want to discover what's possible in sexuality. Like, what is that spiritual experience that people experience when they're having sex? What is accessible to us if we put our minds to it? And how do you
Sure.
get there? And what is it going to teach to us about our human nature and our our grander, more, holistic nature
Yeah. Yeah. I
as a
love
human?
that. I love that. And I love how, in a way, that moment and those incidents really kind of created that trigger, and it became the portal to seeing there's so many possibilities of exploring and seeing what meaning that could hold for us. But I also
Exactly.
love how, in a way, that irreverence, although obviously there's the shadow side to it, essentially there was an underlying playfulness to it as well. So there's the shadow light and there's the light side, right? And in a
Like,
way,
you mean the incident of the
yeah,
Playboy magazines?
yeah, and the kids being irreverent and kind of pointing to things and just crossing boundaries in the classroom as well. It kind of
Yes.
sounds like, in a way, there's this thing of like,
Curiosity.
yeah, curiosity, and yeah, there's the kind of more shadowy side, but there was that sense of like curiosity and play around exploring and finding out, and how, in a way, sometimes even that can be a really important trigger, right? For
Absolutely.
us
Yeah.
to have these conversations and look at sex in a
Exactly. And
more
just
meaningful
how
way.
much of a vacuum we were all in around sexuality. So you just get these magazines and you're like, ooh, like what's that? Like, I remember once, and this was actually not a negative experience. I was at my friend's house, and she had this satellite dish, and her
Yeah,
parents weren't there. And then there was one station that was all porn. And it was
yeah,
like these kind of situations in a household, almost like a one of these sitcoms of family, but it turned out to be sex, and I
yeah,
remember
yeah.
we were both like really curious looking at that. Like, there are a lot of curious, we want to know about this
Absolutely.
powerful force, because I have a friend of mine, who talks about it in their culture, in the First Nations culture. They talk about sex as being a fire.
Right.
And I think it's such a nice analogy, because fire can be this beautiful fire that keeps you warm, cooks your food. It can be a fire that destroys forests. It can be a fire that's like burns you. It can be a
Yeah.
fire that just brings you the warmth you need. So it's
Mhm.
like this thing, and it can be out of control. It can be well controlled. It can sizzle out. And I
Yeah.
think there's so much interesting there in that analogy, to see it
Absolutely.
that way.
And I'd love to explore kind of things with you in terms of, you know, that sex becoming the portal and an opening to all these possibilities. And, one of the things that, as I've been getting older and kind of getting more comfortable with myself and um, enjoying sex so much more, is one of the things I found is that, and then connecting with the spiritual practice as well, I really see it as such a potent source of, it's our sort of source energy, and it's where we kind of have all this untapped potential. So, it creates this awe and this excitement. But I'm kind of really curious to hear from you about, from the people you interviewed for the book, for instance, kind of some of the key responses that people are having and the sort of more primal connection that they have around sex? Is it kind of like in terms of like, yes, it's source energy and we're tapping into our potential? Is it kind of tapping into more fear and bringing a lot of stuff for healing? Is it something that is just seen more of as a kind of just normal exchange of energy? How are people experiencing themselves in relation to sex? And what are some of the maybe examples that kind of really surprised you?
Yeah.
Or made you feel like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I hadn't considered that.
Yeah. Well, I think like I had a very active involvement in like when I was taking on this topic, but I would also like actually participate in workshops or go to different things. I really wanted to learn it from. I'm a very experiential type person.
Yeah.
Because for me, I don't want it just to be an intellectual idea, but I wanted to really experience like what is going on for myself, you know, in these different situations. So one thing that I did take a workshop of or took a training of was this course with VᖘBR, which was on like sort of so it was a Tibetan Buddhist approach to Tantra.
Right.
And so I enrolled in this workshop and everything, and I would receive all these videos to watch. And I think one of my big aha moments was to see that like there's these practices that people have, and they'll have meditation, sound, breathing, and then there's practice with the partner. And as the energy increases, because basically the whole like premise of Tantra is that, you know, there's all these different chakras in your system, and they're more or less open depending on how well the energy is circulating. But energy, like the sexual energy, gets activated and it starts like, you know, moving through these different energy centers. And if they're locked, they can start like hitting up against them, and almost like as a purifying, catalytic kind of energy, right?
Absolutely.
And so in this moment, when she was doing her practice with her partner, at one point she just has this kind of like catharsis where she just breaks down in tears. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, wow, it's so powerful. Sexual energy is so powerful that it can wake up this dormant sensations in your body of grieving or wounding or whatever it is, like unspoken stuff that just lodge themselves. Because as we know today, more and more somatic work is showing us that we keep a lot of memories in our body, right? In our energy centers. There's all this like circuitry that starts working with this blocked energy. And so when you dislodge it, when you dissolve it, it sort of like can give this kind of release of energy, which can come out of complete laughter. It could be tears. It could be just a very intense emotion.
It's release, right? It's release of energy, and often we're not even aware of where the stuff is coming from and what it can have tapped into. That's the beauty of it, isn't it?
So that's what I thought was like, that was one of the big aha moments. I was like, wow, like sex is really energy moving through your body, and it has the potential of healing you because of the intensity. And then Tantra practices or other practices, there's many ways of approaching sexuality these days, but basically it has the goal of intensifying and through these different visualizations, everything what's the word I'm looking for? To sort of I have it on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah, I know it's on
to not emphasize, but to
highlight,
amplify is the word I'm looking for. To amplify the energy. So when we're having sex normally without amplifying it, we're already having releases or we're having experiences. But Tantra is actually consciously taking the energy and amplifying it. So it's even more of a cathartic experience and healing, right? Yeah. And so the more that you move this energy through you, the more you're going to open up all the different areas in yourself that are blocked. And the dark side of that, as I know that you like also exploring the dark side of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
One other story that was, again, through interviewing Davy, was that she had been working on this whole Tantra practices for so long and had really developed such a powerful energy that when she would have sex with people, it would be a very powerful experience for them and it could heal them. But if she started realizing that like her energy was so strong that she had to really be wise about who she would sleep with, because it could be too powerful for someone if they're not prepared. And if they're not prepared to look at their shadow, if they're not prepared to deal with what comes up. you know? And so she had this one experience, and I actually talk about it in the book, where she has this guy that comes, and he's supposed to be a conscious kink guy. So she's like, okay, he's got to practice. He's got his, he's worked through some of his stuff. But when they actually did have sex, it was so powerful that it kind of like blew a fuse for him.
Yeah.
And they had created all these contracts together, or like agreements, like, okay, well, we're going to be, monogamous right now. We're going to be doing this, this, and this. And then immediately after, like, his like almost his fuse got blown out, and he ended up, like, I think the next day over at an ex-partner's place having sex, and
oh wow,
basically losing it in terms of his. They were probably practicing some form of kink, and he kind of lost it. And he ended up in prison that night because he just couldn't manage what had been woken up in him.
Wow. Okay. So so it's kind of like, in a way, that connection, because it's like sometimes we don't know, like you said, and often people hide behind personas as well, and we have a really good way of expressing and saying what who we are and what we do and how evolved we are and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of that ego going on in the spiritual community, not just in the spiritual community. And I think, but there can be a different story behind it.
Yes.
People are actually
when you're confronted with that energy moving through your body, and then you hit up against whatever in your life is blocking, and then suddenly you're like, instead of it dissolving, it just kind of creates a glitch. And and just like, you don't know how to deal with your energy with it. So I just thought, when I heard that story, I was like, whoa, like, this is so
powerful.
Interesting. On one hand, it's this powerful catharsis for healing, but can also be too much for people that are not prepared, So
it's like a Pandora's box in a way, really, isn't it?
I love how you tap into all the things without even reading my book. It's like, I have to show you something.
I hadn't, because I haven't read it yet. Obviously I will.
I know, and like,
I'm kind of,
there's
wow, interesting. Oh wow, I had no idea.
I know, I made this cartoon. It was like Pandora's box. Sex is Pandora's box.
I'm really interested in the theme of Pandora's box, though, and for me, there's something about Pandora's box being essentially the portal to shadow, because in the myth, in myths, Pandora's box, and I mean, I don't remember the full story about it, but it's kind of seen as like the thing you want to stay away from, the way it's presented.
Yes.
Right? Because when you open it, all hell will break loose. But actually, in a way, and how we get to understand our experience through accessing deeper layers of our shadow is it's not an evil thing. It's essentially our untapped potential. It's just that we need to really be able to access it and see it and embody it and be able to kind of like disarm it.
Yes.
So the power that is held within the whatever is hidden inside the box is like, it just needs to be disarmed by simply being able to witness it.
Yes.
And uncoding it.
Yeah.
And I remember being able to embody it.
Absolutely. I remember going to this one workshop, and it was kind of like exploring the shadow. That was one of the themes. And the guy that was leading the workshop, he told us, okay, take one of your shadows and walk around the room and act it out. And I remember playing the needy, kind of like, oh, please, like that needy person. And it's like our shadow usually is the thing that we're most ashamed of. Like, we don't want anyone to know about it. And it comes from a wounded place, so we're kind of not wanting to even admit it to ourselves. Mm-hmm. But there was something so liberating about going around the room and, being this super needy person and playing that out and being like, oh, like, I don't have to be scared of this. Like, this is something that's like, I can explore it now. I can understand where it's coming from. I can take care of it, I can own it, and there's something really beautiful, exactly what you say, like allowing things to
liberating,
expressed. And that's something I also see, like, that I've created this kind of program that's called the Incubator, and we kind of take on the themes of the book, but it's really an opportunity. Like, I tell people, it's kind of like a creative writing process where I get people to take their pen and write down, like, I ask them a question and just to write right away. And like, sometimes people are so ashamed about what comes out, but like, that's actually a gift. You know, if you can just
Yes.
like say it and own it. Like there was last week, there was something someone found out about themselves and they just had written and they're like, I feel so like this kind of like vulnerability hangover. But honestly, it's like it's the beginning of being honest with yourself. You know,
And
we
I love
carry all
that.
these things.
I love that, and also there's the element of being witnessed, right? So when you act, when you play it out, and you act out that role, or when you are in a group of other people, and you get to write your piece, and then it gets to be, I'm guessing, gets to be shared with other people. You have an opportunity to be witnessed, and I think that's an aspect of the healing that I find really important. When,
It
in a way,
is.
it's creating sacred space, and I kind of see sex and the exchange that takes place in sex as it gives that opportunity. You know, we are being witnessed in our most raw, vulnerable, uh, potentially vulnerable kind of place, and of course also the space we can hold for role play as well in it, and the
Exactly.
opportunity to go somewhere with that. um,
Yeah.
I really like that. I'm kind of interested to something that's coming up as we're talking about all this now. I'm really enjoying the conversation, by the way. I'm kind of really interested in this whole thing of like, one of the things, I don't know if it's something you encountered myself yourself. Um, Maybe not so much, actually, probably yes, in the spiritual community as well. A pressure that men can have around really performing well and really showing up as like, I'm a sex god and I can, you know, I know how to have sex and I know how to, you know, but also almost kind of taking the role of like technique and being really good and being kind of the one who navigates the whole thing. And I don't know, you know, I don't know if us women we have that. um for me, I always saw sex as a bit of a playground and then a sort of place to experiment and play. But really kind of the whole aspect of technique doesn't really seem to be particularly a thing, but more the capacity to connect, you know?
Yeah.
And in
Yeah,
a
I
way, that
definitely think
becoming
there's
more in the
a,
forefront.
yeah. Well, I think, you know, performance is a huge, huge, huge conversation. And it
Yeah,
comes from so many different places around, you know, how you find value for yourself. Um, you know, we're in a format of society where there's a lot of like pressure to perform and to be good, and you know, getting this kind of job brings you this kind of, you know, status. And so I think for men, there's a lot of pressure around
yeah,
performance. I think women experience performance as well, in their own way. You know, like they're supposed to be the sex goddess and they're supposed to attract the guy and be so sexy and so beautiful. And they're supposed to like be
yeah.
wow by the woman. And so she has to as well have the great orgasm or have this or that. And it's all these things that bring us out of the experience. You know,
Mm,
like when we're trying to perform or we're trying to please or we're trying to be something, we're out of the experience. And so it's a real practice of letting go of ego, letting go of what we should be to get into that moment and that connection as you speak. Um, and I think, you know, it takes something to, it takes a level of maturity. It was so funny because like last
mm.
week, I started a new group and there was a few men in the group, and um, they it was like so interesting. You know how men evaluate women with a point system? Like she's a
Yeah,
nine
right.
or
Yeah, yeah,
10.
yeah.
And like all the women, like they don't talk about this about men, you know, but like right away, like the two men talked about the point system, and I was just like,
That's hilarious.
you know, it's like they as well have their way of like, you know, it's like, yeah, well, how do I fall in love with a woman when she's not a nine, you know? And like, okay, like this is the frame of mind you're in. But it's a real, I think it's a real, again,
Interesting.
inheritance of what's valued and what's not valued, and how we're like trained to be, you know, like I don't know if you had a situation like this when you were a teenager, but I remember in grade 12 when we're just about to graduate, all the guys suddenly had this pressure that they had to not be virgins anymore. and they were
I
going through
did.
ravages of trying to figure out how they could have sex, even if it was poor, terrible sex. They just had to say they had sex, you know? And so it's like, it's much more of like this kind of thing where they can say like, I have achieved this, as opposed to the experience with the person. Whereas the girl's much more of like that romance of being loved and, you know, being chosen, you know,
Sure, yeah. But
So
I get that pressure. I had that pressure. Did you have that pressure when you were younger? But it came at the right time. I guess I didn't see it so much as in that kind of way.
Pressure of what? Just to be
to lose my virginity at the time, you know. I think because it had been a very organic, I came to that very organically, developmentally and hormonally. I think I was at the right place. And I think when I tend to get those kind of pressures, it tends to be more of an organic thing as opposed to conditioned or societal or whatever. Or so that I can go and say to the other person or to my friend, oh, I just had sex. I felt really ready. I felt like it was something I had to get rid of, my virginity. But I was lucky because I was in a really, I lost my virginity to, well, my sort of first proper boyfriend. We were in love, you know. He was good for me. He was super interesting. He was a controversial artist in the making, but a really nice, solid guy. And we knew our families. We spent time, you know what? We spent weekends together. So, but it happened in that context. But I definitely do remember feeling like I had to get rid of it. It was like, I mean, obviously, I didn't rush to have it, but it was because I was ready for it.
Yeah, well, it sounds as though you're describing like there's this threshold that we all kind of have to go through. That's almost like a rite of passage. And it sounds like you were in a context where you're really curious, you felt interested, and you're driven to like discover it, but you were also in a relationship with someone that you really loved.
I think I would have felt it, absolutely, but I think I would have felt it even if I wasn't in that relationship, that I was developmentally ready and at that stage.
There's a kind of curiosity that could come out of this feeling of like, okay, I really have this hunger for this now. It's like, you know, when you're hungry to try out the first pot, you know, smoke, or, you know,
exactly.
There's a bit of a taboo there, and you're kind of wanting to know what it is because everyone's talking about it. And on top of it, you have all the hormones and all this drive that's there behind it. But if we go back to the whole question around how men feel in sex and how women feel in sex, I think it's very complex, and it depends where everyone's at in their maturity and what they're seeking, and, you know. So I think I think the word maturity actually is a very interesting thing to hold, because it's like, you know, we can be very first level with sex, and we can also be like we're not just about our personal experience, and we're also concerned about the other person. There's a capacity for holding more. And there's some points in our life when our maturity is not as big. Well, we're just more focused on ourselves. And so it's like, how do you get to this place where this is going to be this exchange that is a discovery and play? And you had also this question around, you know, even around, let's say, you know, what are the different means to get to healing, right? And you said, okay, there could be some different things that come about. Even maybe some of the more difficult things are allowing catharsis to happen. And there was one of the people that I interviewed was 𝙎𝙤𝙧𝙀, and he does conscious kink, but he creates with his clients that come and work with him specific role playing to allow for catharsis to happen and to get empowered or to work through some form of trauma or whatever. So like sex can be played and worked in different contexts and with different purposes and different intentions. And it's going to allow for that integration that we want. What we're trying to avoid is situations that keep on fragmenting you and breaking you in different ways, or alienating you from yourself, or you have an experience where you leave your body, you're not embodied because of some reason. Like, the whole point is more and more going through these experiences that are healing, that allow you to be embodied through breath into your body, so you can have an experience with the other person and not escape. Like, that you have your voice, you can ask for what you want, you can say no to what you don't want. You're there, as opposed to, again, someone who's been disempowered in their voice. They're gonna like let things happen to them that you know, they don't speak up for, but then they're unhappy at the end of it because it's a hurtful experience, you know?
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
very complex thing, but you have to
Yeah.
sort of become, that's why we need sort of these maps and orientations to understand, like, okay, like this is what's going on. This is what the dynamic is happening.
It's interesting. I came across a woman called Jaya. I don't remember her surname, but she's
Yes.
yeah. So she's a sexual coach, and she's
Yeah.
kind of come up with this model. Well, it's like the erotic blueprints.
Yes, yes,
So
yes, yes.
she
Sure, yeah.
created those. She understood those key. Like, I guess in a way that's one roadmap, right? And I found that very interesting, because I'll tell you some of the things it taught me, kind of understanding my blueprint, was that in a way, there are some templates, and it's almost kind of like then started acting, it's sort of becoming a thing like, well, once you start to understand your template, then you start working out and understanding your partner's template. And in a way, it's almost like a love language, right? Like we have love languages, we understand what's our love language and what love language our partner speaks. And what's interesting with that is that one of the erotic blueprints was actually kind of more yeah, it could be BDSM, or kind of a form of
Yeah.
BDSM, and kind of more kink involved.
Yeah.
And it was really great that that was provided there as a template, making it really conscious. And in a way, like you talked about having the roadmaps, like we need templates. We need to understand that these things exist, almost like archetypes exist, right? So we need to
Exactly.
understand, like, you know, yes, that some people will resonate more than others. And it just made me kind of more open to sort of the different types of sexuality out there. And also kind of like, it made me curious, because I realized, like, I was the shapeshifter. So that made me very curious, because there was a quiz you took. And then I understood, okay, so there's a lot more than I realized about me. And I really love what you brought to the table, because you realize actually there's a lot to choose from and enjoy. When done with the right intention, sacred space is created. It's so much safer for people to explore.
Exactly. Yeah.
How, I'm curious to know, from the space you're created with your incubator, where you have all these peeps talking about the things on your book, how easy is it for people, do you think, to create sacred space? And how much of an issue do you think it is when we are not able to create that, when it comes to really you know, enjoying sex with people safely, being able to get out of our comfort zones and explore more of ourselves through it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's really interesting because I've been noticing that it's the intimacy that gets created in the incubator happens quite fast. But people have to be ready for it. Like there's been maybe one or two people that haven't been able to, like they show up and they're like, or they're too scared to show up, you know, because like as we all know, sexuality can be a very heavy or
Right.
intense topic for people. But if people are committed and they're ready to go in the process and they're ready to meet up against any resistances they have or reactions and still show up, I mean, in one session, because we you know, being the intense person that I can sort of be sometimes, and you'll notice when you read the book, I start right in the deep end. You know, I go to the bottom of the barrel. I'm like, this is what's going on, folks, in the
Yeah,
bottom of the barrel.
I'm with you. I'm the same. I'm the same, you know. I'm the
And the
same. I
whole
get it.
book kind of then goes up towards more and more integrated experiences that are much more, you know, empowering. But I start off with like the bottom of the barrel where, you know, you're you know, basically having situations of non-consent sex, right? And it's hurtful and it's painful. And we start with that conversation and and I kind of find techniques to get people to ease into the conversation and also to talk about without necessarily describing all the details. Just get
Mm.
them, like I have this one exercise I get them to do, and it's really powerful, where I get them to write about something where there was non-consent, but we don't talk about specifically what happened, but we talk about the objects in the room and the feelings in the room and the
That's a great
space,
technique.
and through the whole space, we know what happened.
Yeah.
And it's
Interesting. I love
crazy
it.
what comes out. at the level of
Yeah.
artistic quality, it's
I love it.
amazing what comes out. And the people can talk about it and people can receive it too.
Mm.
Um,
I love that. That's such a great
yeah,
idea.
yeah, and it just allows people to ease into the conversation, acknowledge the things that they're carrying, acknowledge it, and have people witness. And right away, since we're talking about the things that probably are the most traumatic in our life, and we have this whole group of people who have experienced similar things, or at least are good listeners to it, it creates this intimacy in the group right away, and it
Right.
bonds the group. And from there on, we just like take on all the conversations, and it just creates such a powerful vessel to transform in.
Mm. And do you think that I really love that, and it kind of brings to the whole thing about just finding creative ways to connect with people,
Exactly.
and creating sacred space. And in a way, when I say sacred space, for me, it can mean
Yeah.
different things for
Yeah.
different people,
Yeah.
but it should invoke a sort of sense of safety and a
Safety
sense
and
of
healing, like
reverence.
intentions for healing. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Acceptance, no,
yeah,
non-judgment.
absolutely. Yeah.
And
And
people bump up against that. They're like, like I was saying, like some people experience like, oh my God, I can't believe I just shared that with people that I don't even know.
nice, great.
But it's beautiful because they kind of slowly realize all the ways they've been guarding themselves. And it just allows for a beginning of a peeling off of these different layers. And I love what you underlined around the creative process is I find it's such a powerful way to let energy move in a
Yeah.
creative way, as opposed to be like,
Yeah.
you're lying on your sofa talking to your shrink, and you're like, poor
Yeah.
me. I mean, of course, it's everything can serve. Everyone has their way of getting to where they
Sure.
need to get, but there's something very powerful when we play with that playful energy of creativity because it sort of helps us move things and
Yeah.
in ways that it doesn't have to be driven by the intellect. It just allows your soul to let it express itself in
It's
surprising
play.
ways.
Yeah,
It's alive.
it's like play, isn't it? And I kind of wanted to ask you, as you're talking about this, what is your intent around the incubator? Obviously, you explore the themes of the book, but when you've created that space for people, what was your intent to have some of the key aspects of what the group was about?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and I think even like
Because
as
that
I
affects things, right? That really sets
absolutely
the tone
yeah.
of, all that we're talking about.
Well, it's interesting because when I first got the download for the book, I mean, not the book, the incubator was really, it's something almost like came down, like, this is what you
Nice.
need to do, like, there's going to be creativity, self-expression, there's going to be taking on the themes of the book, there's going to be, there's going to be a place where we get to
Nice. Slay.
explore. But of course, like, I got a group together to be the beta group and just test it out to see, how do people react? How are people going
Nice.
to, experience this? And it became very, very obvious that there's certain themes that come back from incubator to incubator that are really, it's a powerful place. And this is
Right.
probably like the place that I needed to heal the most in my life too. And it is around self-expression.
Mm,
So sexuality is been a taboo subject for so long. And the whole piece around self-expression, to speak up, to say what you want, say who you are, say what excites you, talk about the things that are difficult to talk about.
yeah.
Like, it's such a powerful place where you get to
Beautiful.
own yourself, with your voice and be heard, seen, celebrated. All those people that are hiding who they really are. This is a place where you get to actually be seen and celebrated, and it's like a birthing process of yourself.
Yeah.
Um, and then the whole piece around performance comes up too, because as soon as you get in the court and you're asked to do something like creativity, people go into, I need to perform mode. But it's like, no, here what we're doing here is learning how to be that antenna, that conduit, that we're taking all the cobwebs off, we're taking out the intellect. We're just going to learn, what does it mean to receive words that are like wanting to speak through you, and to get out of like controlling it and trying to be something. It's like,
Mm,
no, there's something bigger that wants to be said. And can you just be that vessel? And so it helps people to get out of that space of control. And
beautiful.
these things show up in sexuality. We all know someone who wants to control things too much. We know about ourselves where we try to control too much. we all know we try to perform too much. Where do we, you know, like all these things that we experience in our creativity shows up in sex too, because it's a very creative, very ego, it can be a very ego experience too, right? When two people come together, especially when they're still discovering themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think it's been, and then there's all the themes where we go in, like the way I present sex is that sex is the result of all these different things in our life. You know, for instance, if you don't know how to play in your life and you've been regimented in a very controlled environment, and you know you've been taught to perform, learning to let go of performance and control and rigidity and unknown is like, that's in itself a learning process. If you've had abandonment issues or rejection or hurt and you've learned to put this huge armor around your heart, you know, you probably are going to have sex that like tries not to have any heart experience, you know, and you're just going to, you know, as soon as you get too close to the heart, you're going to leave that relationship, or you're going to, you know, end the sexual relationship, or you're going to have sex that's like, okay, physical sex great, but I'm not going to actually open my heart to you, which is another edge. So I kind of explore all these different themes that kind of allow us to see where we're resisting, where are we not opening, where are we trying to control, where are we not in our power, where do we not express ourselves, so that we can start seeing. I mean, I was invited to this summit where I did a 2-hour like sort of a little experience for them of the incubator, and I just got them to write down like an experience where they had sex, but where they felt they didn't have a voice. And there were men and women, and I was like, it was so amazing to have the men speak and be like, whoa, like I didn't realize that there's all these things that I've been trying to avoid about my sexual life or experiences that I haven't connected. I thought I was fine within the sex department, but I'm like realizing, wow, I didn't speak up about this, and this, you know. And then after I asked them, okay, what would it look like if you actually did bring in your voice, and how would that situation transform? I love it. And then it allows them to explore like what that conversation would look like. And I think just like little questions like that that really find the core of like someone's pain or a symptom of their pain, because people, they're unconscious, so they go about, they just do their things. It's like, kind of like learning rote and just doing it, but they don't realize like, oh my God, I was having sex the other day and I didn't speak up to this person because of that, how that was hurting me, or how I didn't like that, or how I didn't want to have sex with them. And it's like, we think this is just women, but it's men too. It's everyone has these experiences, and it shows to us, it's telling us something about ourselves. And the more we just become tapped into it, then we can actually take care of it and realize, okay, why am I voiceless? Am I doing this out of people pleasing? Where does that people pleasing habit come from? Why am I worried about not being loved? Why do I have self-worth issues? You know, and you get to the core of like what's driving your sex life, or driving the way you show up. And the sex life, how you show up in your sex life will also be how you show up in life, you know? So
what you've just said, I love it so much. I feel like, I think it's just really giving some great insight on the power of what you're doing, you know, but also obviously the power of intimacy and sex and coming together with people. But what I love from all these different themes that get to be explored through the questions you bring, and the space that's being held, in a way, it's also for me a reminder how, in a way, sex is that portal to our life source, right? And life force. And in a way, life force is everything, and that our life force really affects everything. And it's not just about our sex life and our intimacy and the way we connect with people, relationships. Is the way we connect to our work and how we show up consistently or not consistently enough. It's the way we connect with family. It's the way everything that we do, it becomes part of everything. So I really, really love that, and how, in a way, that holding a space like that can give an opportunity for people to heal. And it sounds that, in a way, healing is, you know, but as well as that self-reflection and understanding and insight, and kind of creating change, or however people wish to go after that. It just feels like it's a really potent space. And one of the things that I has come up one of the things I wanted to talk to you, but also has come up as we were talking about at different times, the whole thing about, in a way, just sex becoming a catalyst, and a catalyst for healing, for transformation, for that portal that opens up to the elation as well as the destruction of a person, and how, in a way, I don't know, just really some of the ways that we can go about harnessing its power. What are some of the, I guess, somebody who wants to kind of start reflecting on the way they connect intimately with somebody, what are some of the sort of questions we can start asking ourselves that will make us kind of connect better, will make us feel safer, whatever you want the thing to be?
I think it's a really great question, because this is only in the process, when you have these insights and you just start writing them down and making a book. Sometimes you don't always know how to describe what's in this book, but
it's a huge topic. It's an incredibly deep, powerful topic, isn't it? So in a way, where do you start?
Yes. And what one reader reflected back to me, and I was so happy, and she had done the incubator as well, and she reflected back like, wow, this book is about a lot of the unconscious, unspoken things that we're not addressing. And it gives an opportunity to become aware of them and speak about them. And so that's kind of what I really dove into, was the unconscious parts of things. So like, for instance, like that whole piece around, okay, are you guarding your heart? Is your voice not being self-expressed? Do you come from a place of being full of worth, or you feel like you have to confirm your worth in the relationship or in the sexuality? Are you someone that is passive, or can you show up for play, or do you let yourself be controlled, or do you have to control someone to feel safe? So these are big questions, but they're basically, I find that a lot of the things. That's why I love the format. And we talked about, the importance of stories. Each chapter has a story of different people that have different experiences, and through that story, we can start identifying for ourselves the areas that are unconscious for us. Most people, when they read each chapter, there's going to be something that they're going to learn about themselves. And it's because sometimes they're very subtle, they're dynamics. Even the whole chapter around sexual vampirism is super interesting, because I think, when I look at how the world plays out in most of, encounters in the bar scene, or, whatever kind of different environments, where most people are driven by not fully disclosing what they want, and they're kind of like in these gray zones, and they create these kind of like, kind of create these imaginations that are kind of illusions, but to get what they want finally, which is get the energy. If we understood that sex is actually energy, we'd understand that we have to learn how to manage our energy, and make choices and get through those illusions, so that we know, like, oh, am I falling for an illusion here? And it's like right after it's done, goodbye, hasta luego, to the person that just got the goods and packed away,
And actually, sorry. No, please do continue.
No, I was just going to say, so like, even be able to identify, like, in our lives, like, what kind of partners do we attract in our lives? Are they people that are there for us, or they're just there to take, or what are the conversations that are not being had in my marriage that is like becoming stale, just like, what is it that needs, like, it's such a process, at so many different levels. So, I think it's a really great place is to take all these questions, but if you really want to go a little bit deeper, take the book, and every chapter has questions.
Does it?
That allows people to start having a bit of a reflective practice. Because like I say, like the themes that I'm taking on a lot of them are unconscious, and they're the unraveling of what's going to allow your sexual energy to be free and to move through you. But there's all these different places that there's little knots, and we have to start learning to find them and unravel them. And most of these things are in our conscious, but if we start naming them instead of acting from them, like that's when the shadow comes in, is we're acting from them. But if we can like identify them, untie them, then we're allowing ourselves more access to that life force, because we're just allowing more and more life force to come through. And
Yeah.
it's very, it just
Yeah.
allows yourself to show up in every aspect of your life more powerfully.
Mm. You know, I thank you so much for that. One of the things I was talking with my coach, it wasn't obviously on the theme of sexuality, but I think it's completely relevant, and I see the similarity there. I was just talking to her last week about how when we work with the right people, actually that they can sort of activate both our light and shadow, and it can bring it out. And I was thinking about it also in the context of a connection, intimate connection, how when my heart is involved, and generally, I'll be honest with you, at this stage in my life, I tend to, I went through my experimentation in my 20s, and I've enjoyed it, and I've had really deeply loving connections. And I feel like I kind of tend to go where also the heart is these days, and I kind of want it to be part of the experience, right? And I'm saying this because I don't want to take it for granted. It's okay, like it's okay for that not always to be the case, okay? But one of the things I find is that the closer the connection, and I'm not going to unpack to say exactly what that connection is about at this point, but I feel that it will invite more of my dark as well, when emotions are involved, and I find that really fascinating, and I find it more potent when that happens.
Yeah.
I don't
Well, I love
feel
what
it,
you're saying. Yeah, I think it's so accurate what you're saying because basically, if we look at how the human being is constituted, there's different layers of ourself that we can bring into the court. So, for
Mm,
instance, once we decide, okay, you know, we've got a clear contract with someone that we're going to have sex with, we can just bring our physical bodies in and be like, hey, we're just going to have a physical experience here. That's
mm,
one level to bring yourself on the court, allowing your body to be loved, allowing your body to be sexual, allowing the release of sexuality. But then there's other layers, like I talked about play and creativity. Can you unleash your creativity and playfulness into the court, which brings another level of vulnerability because it's like, you have to take a risk when you're playing. Are you going to be received? Are you going to be reciprocated? But then there's also like another level of bringing yourself in the court is, start bringing in your sense of self and you're opening your heart up. And it's like,
mm.
that brings you in the court even more.
Yeah.
And then bringing in your commitment to transformation and to speak your truth, that brings you in the court. Bringing in your spiritual essence in terms of like your purpose and where you're trying to be and to try to be in alignment with yourself. All these things are like more and more powerfully in the court because it brings more and more levels of our, we're these multi-layered human beings. So, we can put one little sliver in, but we could also put the whole, card deck in. It's
Absolutely.
like, hey, we're really putting it all in here and we're going to try this out. It's, if you just put one card in, it's different than putting the whole card game in, right? So
Yeah.
I'm just trying to find an image to like help us
Yeah, yeah,
see
yeah,
that
yeah.
there's
No, I
like
get it.
different layers.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Yeah. And, but it's interesting how, in a way, to me, that's part of the whole thing of sacred space. I feel that I want to have this, I kind of, I want to have the deeper aspect of me invited into the playground,
Yeah.
sexually with somebody, and having that element of intimacy, because I think that's going to, in a way, challenge and help me kind of unravel in a deeper way.
Well, I
And
think it's a very good point because basically,
yeah,
I think the more we become evolved human beings, it's a perfect proportion to our integration levels, right? So the more we become integrated human being, the more that our body is integrated with our playfulness, our creativity, our sense of self-worth, our heart, our spiritual like our spiritual essence and who we are. Like the more everything starts getting more and more integrated and working together, it's harder to separate
mm,
one part of ourselves without doing harm to the rest because like more and more of it's like working together, you know
mm,
there's parts of in our history when we're not fully understanding how everything works together, so we'll do things but we're like, oh, like this is interesting, that was fun, but like, I think I want more than that now, or
yeah,
and I think as you get older you start having a bigger picture of all the different elements that are necessary for you. And I think it's wise to just be attentive to it, because the more the more you respect yourself, the more you're gonna have things in your life that you actually that are actually nourishing and supporting of your becoming, you know? So I think it's only normal as you become more integrated to not necessarily want certain other experiences that might not feel as complete. You know, you can do it, but you might just feel like you become more and more aware of the gaps and the lack of certain things, you know?
But also, how complex is it in a way, that matching of, if you think about it too much, you know, in a way, that's why we are so led by chemistry, right? Because to some extent, if you kind of sit and unpack it, there's so many elements that in a way kind of that have to come together to really create that powerful result, right? In terms of, okay, the intimacy and the challenge of stripping you down more and more to your core and your authentic self, the acting more from your authentic self as opposed to the persona as you come in, being less, maybe giving less focus on the performance and more into the meaning, whatever, all those elements, coming with the right partner who will know to hold the space. It can be such a complex thing, all of that. And in a way, I don't know, I'm just thinking in terms of like a hopeful message for,
well, I think, you know, the more you do go on this path, it's kind of like it is a sort of a winding up or a winding down, depending what direction you're going with yourself. But I think every step of the way, whenever you're taking a step forward, there is a risk involved. And there's going to be a risk that's going to be the right risk for your growth period of that moment. So, you know, some people stagnate in places where they're like, well, you know, they feel like, well, there's no one that's out there that's actually capable of meeting my needs. Well, that's also stagnation, because we're not fully living into our capacity of creation and going out and creating those situations or having the conversations that create opportunity or possibility, you know? So I think every step of the way, there's a risk that you have to take. You have to take that risk. You don't know what you're getting into, but you fully engaging to allow for that growth to happen. And, you know, maybe things don't work out, but you're going to learn something about yourself instead of just like wanting to control everything. It's like, like if I do want to move forward, I do have to take some risks, you know? I have to try things out. I have to put my heart on the line, even if it might not be fully safe yet, you know? But it's like you have to sort of allow yourself these experiences, because that's the process. And that's what's
such a good point. I'm so happy you're talking about this. Yeah,
and the more you take risks, the more you're also like, you become more empowered, and you like realize, okay, like the next, like you sort of own yourself. You're like, okay, you know, and you just take another risk, you know, and you're like, it's that process of self-discovery, but also not being limited by your past. You know, you have to constantly be willing to like try and open up and do the processing work, so that you're not living out of your past, but open to something completely beautifully new.
And in a way, if we have all this resistance, we see a lot of resistance coming up around the risk, then maybe it's also important to kind of try and sit down and say, where is this coming from, a genuine sort of like red flag, and where is it coming from, fear, and just the sense of like, you know, actually this is just like, you know, it's out of our comfort zone, and in a way we're just scared of the Pandora's box, you know, because not all of this will be not all of risk is bad risk. It's like you're saying, obviously it's a lot of it is just, you know, we need to sit down and be honest with ourselves on that.
Well, it's really interesting. I'll give you an example. Like recently I had an experience with someone, and he basically really seduced me. Like I resisted him for a while, and then he seduced, like he did this campaign of seduction to me. And at one point he just got me, you know, and as soon as he got me, I could feel his energy shift, like, and start withdrawing from me. And I was like, oh my God, he got me. I can't believe I fell for this. And it's like, I was like so upset with myself. But something new that I did that I have never done before was I woke him up in the middle of the night, and I was like, look, like I'm just like having a bit of a panic attack right now. Like I just feel your energy moving away, and I feel like you seduced me so intensely and now you got what you needed and you're like withdrawing and I have to name it, and and saying this, it might
That's
was
great.
like part of me would have loved to stay in the illusion that maybe it's going to work, this relationship, but my learning curve is in naming something that is true for me and not being scared of saying it, and I might lose everything. I might lose the person I'm hoping to hang on to, but
because
really,
it makes it real. It really brings it out of that fantasy and that illusion. It makes it real. And once you've sort of said it, you can't, and you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And you've also used your energy, you use your voice, and you said it, so you can't go back. So
exactly. And I knew that to liberate myself, I needed to say it. And in the past, maybe I would have just been like, not say anything and then pretend, be sort of not self-express and play a little bit of like this unauthentic version of myself because I know there's something going on for me, but I'm not saying it.
And can I ask you, did you have a sense as he was seducing you, did you have a sense that was more like he was coming from a place of play? Because I'm really interested in the whole thing about gut feelings and instinct.
Oh, absolutely.
And
I really it was, and I've been working with a therapist actually on this whole theme myself, and he was like, Julie, and I was like, when I came to him, I was like, you know what? I feel like I failed again,
Oh, really?
And then he said to me, you know what, Julie, no, like you pretty much had an eye on him from the beginning because I've been telling him about him to my therapist. And I was like, I saw him coming in the moment happening. I could see it happening and I told him and I saw it after, but I was like, there's part of me that still wanted to be seduced, there's a part of me that still wanted to go for it,
But I thank you for sharing this because I feel I've gone through something similar recently, last year. And what was interesting about this, because I saw it and I knew it, because I read it in his energy, and he was coming out of a really long marriage, actually. So, I mean, he was separated, but I knew it. But it's interesting because I chose the experience of, okay, I know he's not ready, and nothing happened. We didn't get together or anything. But we danced the dance for like a minute. And for those 5 minutes that we danced the dance, I let it prove itself. And it was this thing for me that there's something important about that choice we make to dance the dance for the sake of seeing our proof being proven or something, just see it play it out. And the lessons that come from it. Because we might not be aware of it at the time, but there's a lesson that needs to follow.
Yeah,
and for me, the lesson was, you knew it. You wanted to trust him because of his words and what he said, but actually, he couldn't do it.
Exactly. And it's like, there's these situations and they're a bit of a pattern, that can show up in your life, and you go for them, but like there's a little bit more awareness this time, a little bit in a different action that is new from like the other times, like me waking up and then telling him what I really thought. And instead of waiting, for him to call me back or whatever, and like, this is what and he kind of like, he was really good with words. He was able to make me feel like disarmed again and know everything's great. But like, after a while, I just saw like my intuition was confirmed, but it's like, okay, another time you just did a new action. Even if you fail for it again, there's a new action, a new place of freedom. And like,
and
that's have a little more power the next time something happens where I'm like, this is what's going on. This is what I'm seeing. I'll be able to deactivate things a little bit faster, because they're coming towards me, obviously, for some form of learning. Like we said earlier, they're coming. I'm somehow inviting this energy into my life. There's something I need to learn from it. Yes, I feel a little skeptical of it, but I'm still letting it in. So why am I letting it in,
Clearly there's a reason. And that's kind of comes back to, the risk that you were talking about, I guess, and how we are too complex to even know, why sometimes we need to go through this experience, but we get to choose. If you think about the fact that if you do subscribe to this belief that in a way as souls, when we choose our reincarnations, and we choose which parents we'll have and what lives we'll have and we'll get to experience, and often, the planet Earth is seen as this really intense adventure. And, how evolved we can be our souls to want to experience whatever people get to experience on planet Earth, right?
Yeah.
We don't know the complexity that, you know, there's a lot of complexity. We don't always know 100% every single angle of our motives and the learning involved in this. And we won't know until it happens sometimes, right?
Well, that's one thing, like this one quote that one of my participants said that I really felt like it was such a good, you know, capture the essence of what we're trying to do here, is that there's work to do around sex before, during, and after. And the after piece was like, I could have just been hurt and shut down. I have my little alarm coming off here.
Yeah, and I'm just, I was aware I was going to say that we've started for quite a while.
Yeah, but I would say that, like, basically, what was I going to say around, I got distracted with my little bell.
Sorry.
But we were talking about the awareness that we get, and the little thing, like, basically, like, if we don't do the work afterwards, we can get stuck in these situations and just be like upset and close down. But for me to reopen, I had to really go in to see, okay, like, I had some other experiences that happened shortly after where I had a conversation with one of my brothers, for instance, and I just noticed like how unavailable he was to talk to me, and how he had given me this time to talk to him, and then he didn't call me when he said he was going to call me, and he kind of was like half an hour late. And I just noticed, like, you know, for me, that's kind of been the story of like some of the male archetypes in my life. They just haven't been available. They haven't been present. And like, I haven't been really seen or understood in my family context, you know? And so if I have someone that comes and gives me this feeling that they see me and think I'm beautiful, and they think I'm smart and a genius, and I'm blah, 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 and blah, 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 it's like my brain kind of go crazy. It's like, I so want to hear that, because the environment I grew up in just didn't have the capacity of offering that to me. So it's like, it can become a drug, a little drug, if I have this kind of attention and like focus on me, since I did not have that, you know, from my family context. It's like, it really becomes a drug. So when he started giving me all these compliments and saying texts and messages, and it was like 5 a day, and I woke up and that's the first thing that I would see on my phone. And then when he stopped, it was like, ugh,
like,
you know, it's like, there was a shock, but it was like, and then if you just gave me one little drop after of attention, be like, I'm all open up again. You know, and it's like, for me to be able to see this as a pattern, like understand it within the context of what I grew up with, and start becoming aware of like what's playing out for me, I can deactivate these patterns so that I can start becoming more and more free in terms of, like, I won't need to attract that kind of attention. I won't need to attract someone from the outside trying to seduce me, because I'll know, oh, I'm just trying to find my self-worth in this kind of comment, you know? I'm just trying to find my worthiness. And I feel good about my body, you know, and it's going to be complete, you know. Absolutely. I won't need to like attract that anymore. And it's like, it doesn't mean it's completely complete as we speak now, but I'm working on it. And because these have been big patterns, that this situation gave me a big insight. I'm like, like, okay.
And in a way, I was like, it needs to be a visceral experience for the insight to be had, right? Like, I think that in a way, you know, the self-reflective spaces are really important, because in a way we can really kind of ground the awareness of all that stuff.
Exactly.
But really, it's the visceral experience, the experience being had, that in a way gets to really create that healing as well, from what gets activated and what is being brought to the surface, and in a way what that unfolds. So
I think at one point in your life, when you're really on a journey of consciousness, you can take any situation, if it's good or bad, and find what's going to build you. Like, that's the real place of power and co-creation and creation place, you know. So that's why we have to take risks, because that's where we're going to keep on getting that edge of growth. But you don't want to purposely put yourself in difficult situations to hurt yourself, but you want to say yes to life so that you can like help that energy wherever it's getting blocked in there, like rip it open and allow it to move.
Yeah, it's a really lovely way to kind of bring this slowly to a close as well, I think, with that message, because absolutely we need to be stretched out, and we need to, obviously we're being called to invite the situations and experiences that will help us all grow and gain those insights, and the risk taking is important, to the extent that obviously it really facilitates that growth, and it's not going to, you know, really bring us down too much. And that capacity.
That's why it's good to have someone helping us out on the journey, because then we can have a person with whom can reflect things back to us, you know, like maybe we are someone that moves too fast. Maybe that person will reflect back, slow down. And it's like, okay, trying new behaviors, you know, that's how we grow, is trying new behaviors, new ways of responding, to not be in that rut that brings us always down that same hole, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this conversation a lot. I could go for a lot longer. I think it's such a juicy, there's so many juicy topics on this. And I really appreciate what you brought to the table, and sharing the experiences, both from your group as well as your personal experiences. Thank you for doing so. And thank you for bringing your personal experience as well, because I think it could have been a bit too safe to just talk about it in terms of examples from other people. So I love that you made it personal.
Yeah.
And Julie, I'd love to know a little bit more about how people can connect with you. Obviously, we have some links that people can connect with you. I'll leave them with everybody. But in terms of how, obviously, tell us about the incubator. Is there something that's going to happen, I guess, maybe again after this one ends? Or
the intention that they continue. I'm not sure yet exactly the next date for the next one.
Right.
There's so many crazy things going on in the world that I just want to also like be mindful of what's going on. But at the same time, if people are interested, they can go to my website, CoCreativeSex.com, and go to the incubator and get on the wait list. They can follow me on Instagram at CoCreativeSex, on Facebook at Archambault. My name is at the bottom here.
Yeah.
And if they want to email me, it's julie@cocreativesex.com with any questions.
Beautiful.
I also do some one-on-one work if people want to sort of like right away work through some of these I have these big 5 themes that I kind of talked about that helps us, you know, untangle some of the things holding us back. So people can definitely reach out for that. We are both in different parts of the world.
Absolutely, we are.
You're in London, I'm in British Columbia, BC, so I'm in Pacific time. So, but we found a time that works for both of us.
Yeah, we did. We made it work, which is good. Absolutely.
And I love the fact that, you know, we're in 2 parts of the world, but like we have so much to share and talk about. It's like a fun experience to do that. I love going beyond our little circles of comfort, and I love feeling what's going on in the world. Like I'm a very international thinking person. So
same. And I love it when also, you know, because we haven't known each other very well at all. So we get into this conversation not really having a strong point of reference as to our stuff and our views and all that kind of stuff, you know. So it's interesting coming from that place, you know. I absolutely loved it. And obviously the book people can get from your website, or
so the book is on Amazon.com. I know there's a UK version too for Amazon, but you can also order it. There's a bunch of books that through the Ingram catalog. So basically, if you go to your local bookstore, you can order them in. I know that some books have been shipped to Australia and to UK, so that's also possible. All the different platforms, I think Kobo, just all the different things. You can just look into them, and you can probably just order it. So it's Sex Up Your Life, the mind-blowing path to true intimacy, healing, and hope. And it would be awesome to, if you get it, to write back and tell me how you're enjoying it and what your questions are. It's always fun to have that back and forth. This is a beginning of a conversation, and it keeps on happening.
Absolutely. And as I understand it, that also in the incubator, couples can come together. Single people, they don't need to be in relationship. It can be pretty much, it's open to everyone, right?
It's really it's a work on yourself, really. It's like it's a real investigation of what's in your soul life and what's you're holding in your body, you know, so that you can free yourself. And so I've actually not had yet a couple come to it together, but I've had a couple where there's one that did one incubator and she's like, you go do the incubator. And so the next
Really
one's like joining us this time around. So,
interesting. Yeah,
but it's a real thing that, it's really a journey that we all know that our journeys are officially our own personal journeys, whoever we are with or not. So it's really in that spirit. And it's open really to all cultures, all orientations. It really doesn't matter because it's really about you connecting to who you are. And it doesn't have to be there's nothing imposed on you. It's more of
sure.
this process of discovery, like what's actually real for you.
And from what I remember reading in one of the reviews, because a lot of really good things have been talked about in relation to your book and lots of people talking about it, there was it's kink aware and sex worker friendly, and you have you have people and interviews from people who are transgender, so it's very, very inclusive. And I think that's so important, isn't it, to really bring
Yeah.
everything into the table and have those
Yeah,
conversations.
everyone's like angle gives us a picture of the mystery,
Yeah,
That's what's beautiful. Having them, like, that's why I love having a very rich group in the incubator, because the more we have different perspectives, the more we're like, wow, we can behold things from different angles and be like, wow, I discovered something new about this multi-complex
yeah,
thing.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. I
Thanks.
really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, everybody who really enjoyed this conversation, feel free to connect with Julie. Feel free to buy her book and obviously connect with her in whatever way you want. And I hope you have a really wonderful day.
Yes, thank you so
And
much.
we get to maybe one day continue the conversation and just,
We
I feel
do,
like
but
there's, let's leave the space open, because I feel that there's opportunity for more
absolutely,
conversations to be
I
had.
love who you are.
Good. Okay, then everyone, thank you so much, and we'll speak to you soon.